All right, we are back live, recording live. Ayo.
How's it going?
It's going. Welcome back, everyone. If this is your first time, thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. And if you're back to join us, welcome to your Everyday Rich podcast with your lovely hosts. I'm Jason.
And I'm Jen.
And we bring you topics on financial literacy and things that we talk about in our living room conversations and how that wraps around navigating cultural differences and
Norms
and stuff like that, and wrap that up around how money and what you can do to boost your financial health and your wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the synopsis. You can go back a few episodes. Before we dive into today's topic, though, this episode is brought to you by Plantwell. Plantwell, our good buddies at Plantwell. Local small business in Milton, Ontario. They cater to the, I guess, the grow space of microgreens and growing your own plants and that hobbyist space. But it's really cool because you can go in there and just take a look at all the things that you need to essentially grow your own vegetables or grow your own crops, grow whatever you want. So check them out. They are local in Milton. So that's Plantwell.
And Instagram. They're also on Instagram if you want to check out their stuff.
Instagram.
It's at Plantwell Inc.
Yes, and you'll find them. But anyways, when we were writing up today's topic, which is something fundamental, I think we believe that everyone should be looking into
and understand,
and that is the topic of
budgeting.
As unsexy and as uncool as that sounds, it's actually quite necessary. And we found that speaking to just our friends, families, just hearing things, reading things, it's actually surprising. There's actually a high stat that not a lot of people budget.
Mm-hmm.
And we found that surprising, but not surprising. If we go back in the day, like we didn't really, straight up, we didn't really budget until probably moving in together.
When we moved in together, yeah.
It wasn't something that we actually as a yuppie just out of school working. Like I didn't look at budgeting.
I did not.
Yeah, it wasn't something that it was top of mind. So
yeah,
I can understand why people don't even consider it. But I think
I also don't think you're looking that far in the future.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because it's not really a goal for you. I mean, why are you looking that far down the road?
You're not thinking about, at least I wasn't thinking about retirement at that time. You know what I mean? You're looking at saving, investing, but really for me, I had no defined end goal.
Yeah.
At that time. I think it's become more clear now, but back in the day, no.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, because you're straight out of school and you're working. I can recall myself I just
have to get money in.
Yeah, it's holy crap! I'm getting paid.
I'm getting paid.
The hell do I need to work a budget about my lunches or what I spend at night and go to the bar? But funny enough, when you actually look at all that stuff, you're like, holy crap! I spent a lot of money on stuff. Booze.
Yeah.
Never. Well, actually, you never had to pay for club entrance.
It's true.
So you saved a lot of money
before 11 o'clock.
Yeah. Shout out to club crawlers,
11 o'clock and on guest list.
Sign up for the VIP guest list. I know.
That's right.
Ooh, $5. But budgeting, as unsexy as it is, it's something that is a really powerful tool, especially when you actually don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that's kind of the main point of what a budget is. Would you not say?
Yeah, I would say so, because budgeting allows you to see, like you said, what is going on with your finances.
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't know what you don't know, right? Society makes it very easy to spend money nowadays. Credit cards, all types of cards, you just tap and it goes.
Yeah. And
right.
Well, yeah, even more so. It's easier now. Like before, it was buy now. The buy now button on eBay. Oh my goodness! That was amazing. It was like, whoa, what did I just buy?
Yeah.
And that's just now tap 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 with everything. You kind of go through. It's very common for us to just say, oh, don't spend too much, right? We all know that everyone says don't spend too much, save more, invest the difference. But if you don't actually know how much you're spending, how the hell do you know how much you're saving?
Yeah.
And remember, like the true creation of wealth, when it comes down to like the most simplistic form, is not how much you make, it's how much you keep.
That's right.
Right. Let's just separate the whole, like, what do you do with the portion you keep? Right. There's lots of things you can do with that.
But the purpose is to get to that specific portion, right? That's the first step, right? Step one is having a surplus, right? Trying to get a surplus so that you can take whatever that is, that surplus, and put it somewhere that works for you, right?
Yeah. And I guess, like, what's a budget? When it is, it's a tracking tool that you essentially look at how much you spend, how much is left over. And give you an analogy. I love using an analogy. It's like you need a plan. Ultimately, it's like it gives you a plan so that you can figure out what you need to do. Take the steps necessary.
Make an adjustment.
To make an adjustment, or it lays down the foundation saying, okay, well, this is how much I'm making. This is how much I'm typically spending on a month-to-month basis. And then you see, okay, well, what do I do? Right?
Yeah.
And all the things you do with it afterwards in terms of the investment vehicles, that's a total different topic. But you need that upfront fundamental piece, right?
And that's why it's so fundamental, because there's no point in talking about investing if you don't have budgeting down.
Yeah.
Right.
And like so I did some Googling because it's interesting, right? I always want to see like what are the stats, right? Because I mean, it's just sometimes it's hearsay, but it's also conversations that we hear when we're talking.
Yep.
I mean, it's not how often you hear with your buddies or something.
Hey, let's talk budgeting.
Yeah. Hey, do you budget? Like, how much do you budget for groceries or daycare or whatever? But sometimes the conversations actually happen accidentally by, like, we're talking about the summer camps coming up around the corner, right? We're getting those emails now about like hey, register your children for the summer camp and all the sports programs or the sport that your kids want to play or any activity.
Yeah, for parents who have kids and plan on sending your kids to summer camp, your budget should be $350 to $450 a week right now. And this is in Milton, so I can't even imagine what it is in Toronto, but this is in Milton, Ontario. That's the current range. So if you multiply that by 4, you're at well over.
That's over a G, man.
Over a G.
Yeah.
A month. Just on summer camp.
Well, I guess the whole point is like sometimes these conversations happen by accident, and then that's where we hear about other friends in terms of like how much they allot for whatever sports, daycare, camps, things like that. So
extracurriculars.
Yeah, extracurriculars. And even stuff that like, we just randomly shoot the shit about, like, oh yeah, my gym membership costs this much. And we hear people go to like, that Jet gym or this gym. It's like, whoa, that adds up too.
Yep.
So anyways, like what I was going to say is in terms of stats, right? Like, so Googled some stats here, and in terms of give you some American numbers, obviously like the American numbers are so more prevalent. So
it's more people.
It's more people. So, but according to my research here, and this is not advice or anything, but this is just.
Did you ask ChatGPT this?
I did not ask ChatGPT. No, I actually.
Well, there you go. You need to ask ChatGPT.
No. Okay. I still want to be able to do my own research, just for a little bit more. Oh man. Okay. 65% of Americans said they don't know how much they spent last month. All right. So if you don't know how much you spent last month, most likely you don't have a budget, right? Because you're not tracking it. So that was eye-opening. 27% of Americans do not believe they need to budget. That's pretty big. That's damn big. Like, why? Why do you not need to budget? We'll unpack that. Unpack that. Gen Z is the least likely generation to know what they spent, followed by, ta-da, millennials.
So what's Gen Z again? Gen Z is it 90s?
It's the
90s?
90s.
90s, right? You're born in the 90s, you're Gen Z?
Yeah.
And then millennials.
Before that.
Okay.
Like
I always get mixed
the 80s to 90s. Give or take. Yeah.
Got it.
Right. So, which makes sense. I mean, because Gen Z are the younger crowd, which like are starting to work, right? Which is exactly like what we were 10, 15 years ago, starting to work, and you were like, I don't know, I don't track anything. So, but a few other things here too. So like, okay, from a Canadian perspective, all right, to all our Canadians here, because we are Canadian, about half of Canadians report having a budget, according to the 2019 Consumer Agency of Canada. That's good.
That's actually not bad.
That's actually really good. Half of Canadians?
Yeah.
I don't know what the poll numbers are, but let's see, right? I mean, and most common thing is using a digital tool, a spreadsheet, a mobile app, which is great to see because obviously we'll touch on that too. Funny little stat here is like 14% used the budget by hand and putting stuff in a jar. So notes in a jar.
We'll touch on that, but anyways, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And we can explain why.
Yeah. So it's like, it's stuff that we kind of learned from our childhood too. So, but anyways, here is actually the eye opener for me when I read this. So, the reasons for not budgeting, okay, is this: 9% said they don't have enough time, or they found it boring. I get the boring part. I totally get the not enough time part. But you know what?
They have tools for that now.
There's tools for that. So, and 6% feel like they are overwhelmed about managing money.
So I think that's the truth.
That's the truth.
I think to me, I think time is an excuse.
Yeah. But then the last stat here is essentially people that were more likely to budget felt they spend more money on their income. They essentially felt like they had a better grasp of their finances. Right.
Of course.
Because they were the ones. Yeah, budgeting. That makes sense because you actually are taking a deep dive. You have a whole picture.
You have data.
Yeah, data.
You have your own data set.
Data never lies. Numbers never lie.
Nope.
Yeah. So, anyways, that was just some stats here I want to share because, like you said, when you kind of dive into the numbers and the stats, it's eye opening because it gives you a sense of like, well, why? What are some of the reasons? And
I think what you pointed out there, the second one where people feel overwhelmed, I think that's probably a lot more common than what that stat. Because I think would you say like 7% or 8%?
9%.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
I think I would guess it's higher than that.
Yeah, I think the poll number is probably, the data set's really small here, but you just,
I mean, people
most likely it's probably bigger.
Yeah, first of all, a lot of people don't like math.
Yep.
It's not calculus, but it is still math, right? And some people get overwhelmed,
intimidated
by numbers.
Intimidated.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing. And then two, especially if you know maybe you're not in a good financial situation, right? It's hard to put that stuff down on paper or in an Excel sheet or whatever to see it in front of you, right?
Yeah.
I think most people know what financial situation they're in. Maybe not from looking at data, but they know. You have a sense of where you are at, right? And when you see that whatever picture it is and you write it on paper, when you see it in front of you, it's not fun, right? And that's scary. But unfortunately, that's the first step in, I think, helping you get out of that situation rather than running away from it.
Yeah, I like the word you used is the emotion of fear, right?
Yeah.
Seeing it on in front of you. Like, okay, if you are in a tough financial situation, if you're living month to month, right, and you're just crunched for cash, the feeling. Like, you don't need numbers to show you.
No.
Like, shit, I'm in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Right, because you're hustling all the time.
Yep.
I mean, but I think it's the other side of things too, is that high income earners by default feel like you don't need to budget because there's a lot more income coming in. However, don't realize that there are a lot of, I don't call them frivolous expenses, but just all these expenses add up because you don't track them. And you don't realize, because obviously there's a greater income than your overall expenses.
Yeah.
But when you track down and you actually look at it, then that same feeling of, oh my goodness, right? Surprise, shock, fear, one of those will come up. And it's almost like, we rather be ignorant. It's like ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
I'm okay with I don't know. Why do I need to look at it for, right?
Yeah.
It's something that is hard to recognize and accept, right? If you're a high income earner, that's, I think, if anything, would be something to look into, because you'll be really, really surprised of how much money you end up spending. You actually spent.
I think regardless of how much income you earn, you should be aware of what you're spending and tracking, right?
Yep.
Like, I remember for us, like I said earlier, I didn't budget till we moved into this house together. And I think one of the first reasons why we started to budget was we had created a budget before we moved in. We looked at, okay, so this is going to be this is what we're going to go to purchase a house. Like, the house is going to cost this much. We're going to spend X dollars on our gas bills, X dollars on water bills. We were like going through I remember going through my parents' bills because I didn't pay the bills at home. So seriously, I had no idea how much a water bill cost. That's how I learned. I went through my parents' bills, and they kept their bills in this filing cabinet in my house, and I literally ran through them and said, okay, how much is a bill? How much is a monthly water bill? How much is a monthly gas bill?
Yeah.
And I threw it into our spreadsheet to say, hey, this is how much approximately we're going to spend. Didn't realize water was so much more expensive in Milton, Mississauga. But
I think it's the other way around, man. But anyways, like, my parents had it in a binder. So, like, 3-ring binder, because you didn't get emails of your bill. It was mailed to you in an envelope on paper.
Yep.
For all you younger people.
And
that's a thing still, right?
And then my parents would write paid across.
Yeah, paid. I still do that too. So sometimes we'll get these random bills, or we'll get these random things. Like, I don't know why some of these companies send you bills still. I don't know what it is. They mess up or whatever. And I get it. I did the same thing. I would go paid on and strike right through. And it's just something that, I don't know, you just saw your parents do and just stuck with you. So, but yeah, no. Like, I actually think when we were looking, we got engaged, that's when we started looking at, like, okay, well, how much is this wedding going to cost? Right. And then all those other things on top, because then obviously moving in, but.
Well, yeah. How much could we afford from a housing standpoint? Right. That was when we got engaged, is, okay, if we're going to move in together, where are we going to buy a house? Where do you want to move in? Where do you want to live? Right. And that's where it started, because then you have to look at, okay, how much does a house cost in different areas?
Yeah. Well, I mean, without getting into the weeds there, I think, like, what it essentially did for us was it set us some boundaries, right? It laid the game plan out about, like, okay, well, what can we spend, and what are we spending now? Right? Does that lifestyle change? Like, do our certain spending habits have to change? Right? Like, I think we mentioned this on a few episodes ago, but, like, we had a clothing budget. There was a line item in our budget for clothing.
Yep.
Because we were working and we needed clothes, and
we didn't need clothes, but we just wanted. Well, at least I wanted clothes.
You much more than I did.
Exactly. Hey.
But, like, okay, I went to work dressed so ghetto, but I mean, like, that was just the culture I was in my job. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, you come out of school, you're not like you have work attire, right?
Mhm.
You're not dressed in business casual at school.
Mhm.
Like, come on. So that was a thing where we had to keep that on there. But what it ultimately did for us was gave us a game plan, right?
Yep.
So it basically said, hey, here's your starting 5 lineup right here: mortgage, utilities, car payments, insurance, food. Right there. That's your starting 5 on the court. And then understanding, okay, well, who's on my bench?
Mhm.
Right? Because those create the whole budget. Like your bench, everyone else, all the way down to the last player.
Mhm.
And sometimes you got to make a cut or you make a trade. Yo, that's a good sports analogy, man.
Make a trade.
And no, it's true though, right? Like
Yeah.
down the road, what did we trade out? We traded out clothing. We don't have a clothing budget now. Like, yo, man, this is smart casual, right? This is smart casual, like relaxed casual
Some
now.
people can't see what you're wearing.
Oh yeah, that's true. Sorry. Yeah. For all the audio people, I'm wearing my everyday clothing, which is my track suit. I call it the track suit. Some people have a suit with a suit and tie. I have it as a track suit. Anyways,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just like understanding where you're at, right? And that's why like you have a plan,
Mhm.
right? You write down what you think you're going to spend money on, and then the most important part actually is comparing the actuals with the plan.
Right. So okay, you are absolutely correct. So I think let's take a few steps back here before we go into like, okay, how the hell do I even budget?
Mhm.
Right? What are the steps to budget? What budgeting we found for us, it actually helped relieve a lot of stress for us. Not necessarily, it doesn't take away stress, but it calms your nerves down a little bit because now you actually understand where you lie, right? There's a line drawn in the sand saying that, okay, well, my financial health is now X.
Mhm.
And I know how much I've spent, know how much I need to spend, I know how much I make, right? And remember, the income, with the interesting part in the budget, your income actually, we just assumed income stayed steady. But remember, your income, I hope, will continue and you will find ways to make much, much more income, regardless of what you do. But um, it reduced that level of kind of unknown, right? Like
Mhm.
where are we?
Yep.
So it did help for us. And if you have never done a budget before, I think those are the feelings you will feel, um, kind of going through this process, right? You'll see the numbers and you'll feel that fear, but afterwards you kind of lay a plan down, saying like, okay, well, this is what I absolutely need. This is what I can cut out. Here's what I need to do, and you have that game plan. Because remember, if you fail to plan, what is it? What's the saying? You failed to
Fail to
plan,
plan to
plan to
fail.
fail. So you got your entire roster there set up. It really is a big sigh of relief.
Yeah, gives you a game plan on what you need to work on,
Yeah.
right? To improve your financial health.
Yep. Right. And ultimately, once you understand your financial health, you can put steps in afterwards now to increase your financial health, your wealth, right? Through investing, through different
Mhm.
business ventures. But you need to have that foundational framework to understand what to do with that money.
Mhm.
Right.
For sure.
So, um, so how do we budget? Like, let's maybe how we budgeted, and then we can lace some examples for how people could budget.
Yeah, so I think the first thing we did was we create a spreadsheet like earlier, like what you said earlier, had all
Mhm.
different categories, right? What are your main categories? What are your needs, right? What are things that you need to survive?
What are some of those, like
Shelter.
this top 5, like your starting 5, right?
Shelter.
Shelter, whether you're
Your
buying your
bills,
house
your
or it's
bills
your
for
rent.
your shelter,
Yep.
right? So things associated with your house,
Utilities.
insurance, house insurance,
Mhm.
right? Then maybe you need a car, maybe because you need to get to work.
Sure.
Or maybe if it's not a car, maybe you need a budget for transportation, right?
Yeah, you take the GO
You
train,
take the GO
you take the
train,
subway.
whatever it
Yeah.
is you
Yeah.
need to go, and you
Mhm.
need some kind of funds for transportation,
Sure.
If you own a car, anything associated with that car,
Gas.
insurance.
Okay. Maintenance. What do you do about maintenance? I know we're going to get into the weeds of it, but you got a car. What did we do?
I remember we put in, I think it was $50 a month on it. Now, every month we don't use the $50 because usually your maintenance bills comes every, I would say, couple months, right? And then you end up spending a couple hundred
so
on every bill.
Yeah. So the best way I could describe it in terms of like how you create a budget, think of it almost like it's just you're planning for that rainy day.
Correct.
Right. It's so if anyone that is into real estate investing, this is almost like your vacancy or your repairs
or
and maintenance. Yeah. Capital expenditures, right? In a business. So you have that money stored. You don't spend it. You still have to budget a lot for it because one day it's like it comes all at once. It's not like you're spending $50 of repairs here and there. So
yeah.
All right.
And that's how we did it.
Yeah. We still do it this way.
Yeah.
Okay. So then cars and then
the second section, I guess, would be things are not necessarily need, but more so wants.
How about food though? Like,
oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Just eating
groceries.
Eating off of my hopes
groceries.
And dreams.
Yeah, groceries are probably a need as well. So that's a big category.
Okay, and if you don't cook because your grocery bill is very minimal, I'm sure your dining expenses, call it eating out, whatever you call it, food. Like how do you
feed yourself?
How do you feed yourself? Right?
Well, that's what I mean. Like just call it groceries at the beginning when you're first starting to do this. Call it groceries.
Yeah.
Okay, and then leave it at that for now. Okay, and then the next section, like I said, you go to the wants. Right. So you have going out, like you said.
We call it entertainment.
And call it entertainment. Yeah. Restaurants, entertainment. So if you're going out with your friends, maybe you go out to eat, maybe you go to the bar, you go out and do some activities, that costs money, right? So lump that all. You can either separate them out or you can lump them separate. We actually separate them out. So we have a category for restaurants, like going out to eat. And then we have another category we call it entertainment.
Yeah. And I think depending on where you are, right, in your life and in your journey, that these are just guidelines, but you may think of it like, well, what the hell do I have to worry about like tracking how much I spend at a restaurant? Well, it's one of the things you'll realize that, you go, okay, I dine out 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever that is, right? And whatever that adds up to, you'll be like, oh, okay, I spend this much in eating out. And then you'll ask yourself, you'll go deep dive a little bit more. Oh, well, I actually have 2 drinks every time I go out. I have appetizers. I have this. I have that.
And dessert.
And then you'll be like, holy crap, right? Okay, well, this is not about like cutting all those things out, but this is an exercise so that it trains you to kind of think not just surface level.
Yep.
Right? Because if you apply this to your investing, your business, you don't just look at high level. You start high level, then you go down into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, well,
uncover everything.
Yeah, and I think before you even do that, I would suggest is once you list out all these categories, and I forgot about kid stuff. Like, so if you're a parent, you also have kid stuff, right? You're going to have kids' clothes that you might need to purchase, or maybe if you're lucky, you'll get hand-me-downs, daycare, all this kind of stuff. If you have a baby, you have diapers.
Like little diapers, right? Is a line item. Like
diapers, formula, there's a lot of stuff that costs money with a baby, right? With kids. Anywho, once you list them out, my suggestion is to track your expenses within those categories for at least 3 months.
Yeah.
I would say if you can, don't change your spending habits. If you've never, this is for a person who's never done budgeting before. Don't change your spending habits. Just live the way you're currently living. Keep whatever you're spending on. Track it for 3 months. That will give you a data set, right, on your current spending habits.
Yep.
Right? And that's your starting point. And like you mentioned earlier, looking at your spending habits, then you can see how does that look like? Because there is no point in setting a budget. You can put down any number you want. If it's not realistic,
Yeah, this doesn't matter.
Like, if you know you spend $400 a month on groceries and you're gonna randomly just throw in, oh yeah, I'm gonna spend budget $100 on groceries. Like,
Yeah.
you know that's not gonna happen. We all know you're shooting for something that is not, it's not a reality,
Yeah. Don't
right?
kid yourself.
Now, if you say maybe I'm spending $400, I want to make it maybe 300, 350. Now we're talking, right? Now we're talking,
Yeah.
right? So without a realistic, not realistic, but your current spending habit and your data set, don't just arbitrarily put in like budget numbers because it was someone else's budget, because
Yep.
everybody's life is different. People can live in different cities. We have different family situations. You cannot compare someone else's budget to your own.
And just if you guys, I don't know if you can hear our kids yelling in the back, but this is the reality, right? What happens when you are a parent going through a financial journey like this, or whatever, a parent in general, and you have kids that like to yell and fight. So, anyways, this is the real
reality.
deal. This is a real deal, right?
Just for context, right now it's a Sunday afternoon at, what time is it?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what time it is. Okay, it's in the
Literally
afternoon.
3:00 Sunday afternoon, and
yeah, well,
we are recording this podcast.
Like you got to do what you got to do, right? We don't have a fancy recording studio yet. The keyword yet, right? But this is the thing. Anyways, I want to fill that in because I'm sure when I listen back to this, I'm gonna hear this when we're editing. So give us
Why
a good
are
chuckle.
the kids screaming in
Why
the
are
background?
they yelling? Anyways, so yeah, like, and I want to just kind of chime in there in terms of like you're talking about like the number being realistic. So you might be thinking, what the hell are these guys worried about $50 or $100? Like, you're missing the point if that's where your head is going, because it is about understanding your financial health, just setting a baseline. Okay. And if your income is significantly more, it's all relative. And that's why I want to keep that in perspective, is that companies that are worth billions of dollars have operating capital expenditures in the billions or the hundreds of millions. And you might be thinking like, well, that's a lot. Well, to them, it's not a lot. But if you remove a zero, that makes a difference. You add a zero, that makes a difference. So it's all relative, right? Maybe someone that's starting this, $50 can actually make a difference because that $50 goes into, I don't know,
a high interest debt,
right? Or it pays off. It allows daycare or babysitting for an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, right? But if you add a zero to that, a factor of zero, now we're talking, right? I mean, it's all relative, but that's just to keep you in contact, right? Because I think you could still create wealth and you can still enjoy yourself spending whatever the $5 at Starbucks every day or eating your avocado toast and still create massive amount of wealth. But ultimately is to understand your spending habits, right? It's not about cutting these spending habits out, it's to understand where you lie, right? We're not here to argue about how you should spend your money and where you should cut things out. It's all discretionary, right? That's the thing. It's discretionary. It's up to you. We have some suggestions, but ultimately it's like, okay, what does it say about where you spend? And you might ask yourself, okay, should I be spending that here?
Well, that's the whole point, right? Like, what now? If you got your 3 months of data and now you're okay, I know how much I spend on groceries, I know how much I spend eating out. Am I okay with my current data, with that current data set?
Yep.
Do you think you can do better? Do you want to do better?
Yeah.
Right? Do I want to be able, once I've listed all that out, how much do I have left over?
Yep.
Right? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's something that you have to ask yourself, right? What are you okay with? Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, having a surplus of money at the end of the month is what's going to take you to your freedom number. Right? Start somewhere. It has to start somewhere. So as minuscule as it may sound, if you are making lots of money, if you're not making lots of money now, if you're just starting your journey, or you're well onto it, we all start somewhere, right? So the fundamentals of doing this right now, develop the habits, that 1% rule. So you start the little habits, you kind of understand what you need to do, then you expand on that. So now we have kind of like the starting 5 plus your bench, right?
And you have data
You have data
for each of those players.
and
Are
we're
we
realistic.
still going with the basketball
Yeah,
analogy?
whatever. We're realistic about this data now.
Yep.
Okay. So then what next? What do we do?
You set budgets for each one. So depending on whether you're going to ask yourself, are you okay with the current numbers you're spending?
Yeah. And
right.
So here, exactly like this, right? Like what Jen is kind of describing is that when you in business, right, you forecast revenue, right? We always have projected forecasts. So this is the exact same thing in your budget, is that you should it's forecasted. It's a best guess that you're going to spend this much money. So update it with actuals, right? When the quarter ends, we look at actual data to say, okay, well, now we have that. So are there guidelines about within those buckets that we should look at or consider?
There are a lot of guidelines out there.
Yeah.
Like if you just go Google budgeting, you'll probably see the 50-30-20 rule.
Oh yeah.
Which is 50% of your net income should be dedicated to your needs, 30% of your wants, and 20% saved / invested. And then there's like I think what the banks use is 30% of your gross income should be
no more than for your shelter, right?
For shelter.
Yeah.
So those are guidelines, right? And yeah, that could be a starting point. You can compare that to your data set and see how close you are. Now, those are not set in stone, because like I said, everybody's budget is different depending on your lifestyle and your own family situation. Where you live is a huge factor into that, right? So I think those are guidelines, but I think the most important part is looking at your current data set and how can you work with that, right? Is more important than trying to follow these guidelines that you find on the internet.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you have these data sets now, and you're looking at like, okay, crap, I spent this much. Hey, I should cut out this or maybe rebalance that, right? Just like a business, because I always like thinking in terms of like how a business would operate. Then you make a new plan, right? So it's like, okay, now the next 3 months, let's recalibrate and readjust some of these numbers to say, hey, if my housing costs are fixed right now, and we won't get into the weeds about like, do you move and do you rent or whatever, but if you have fixed costs now, what can you change the variable cost to adjust that, to reduce it? Because ultimately you want to reduce the amount of money you spend, or make more money, right? Which we'll get into later in another episode. But
so once you set your
do it
budget,
again.
Yeah, do it again. So set new budgets. If you're trying, let's say if you are following the 50-30-20 rule. So you're trying to save 20% of what you make or what you bring in every month. If you start working with that, okay, does your data set allow you, are you saving that 20% a month? Yeah. Right. And if it's not, and that's what you're striving for, what do you have to adjust in those other, I guess, categories to make that work? Right. And I'll go back to the groceries and go on a restaurant example, right? Food is a combination of either groceries, it's a combination of groceries and eating out. Like that's how you feed yourselves, right? It's a matter of, okay, if you increase the amount of groceries you spend, right, and you decrease the amount of going out or eating out dollar number, does the sum of that value of those two categories still less than what you had previously had? That's the whole point, right? So you adjust it, but it needs to be realistic. Like I said, you can't just say, typically I spent $600 to feed my family. All of a sudden I'm going to just write down, okay, I'm going to spend $200. Well, that doesn't really make any sense, right? You can't do that. Now, if you had, let's say I was spending $200 on groceries and $400 eating out, well, okay, how can I make that less? Maybe you spend $300 on groceries and $200 on eating out. Maybe that $500 in that specific ratio could still feed your family, right? It's a matter of how you can divide and conquer the different categories so that the sum of it all is still less than what you had previously.
Yeah, what we're looking at is the bottom line.
That's
the
right.
bottom line number, right? And the top line numbers will all impact your bottom line. So if your goal, right, and we've got I think we should mention this, is your goal is to, let's say, purchase a house or do whatever, right? Or to save more and
save a down payment.
Save a down payment or whatever it is, whatever your actual money goal is right now, that should be essentially the guiding star, right? And once you have that bottom line number, you're like, okay, well, I actually needed to be here. So once you fill in all that information, at least it gives you that data now so that you can adjust, right? What Jen's basically trying to say is like, you get to the bottom number. Now, what do you do, right? What do you need to do? But make sure it aligns with your goal. So who cares about what other people say? And it just brings me back a memory. Like when we saved a lot. Okay. I use the word quote unquote save. When we were younger, because we didn't have a housing expense. If you are an Asian immigrant or a child of an Asian immigrant, or I guess immigrants in general, it's very common for you to live at home way past your 20s. Okay. Our parents were like, stay at home as long as you want.
Yeah, I lived at home till I was 29.
Yeah, pretty much us too, right? I mean, like, it's mocked on in North American culture saying like you should move out. But you know what? There's this essence of like a bond, right? You create with a family, obviously, by that. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent. But the idea is that it allowed us to save so much money because we didn't have housing expenses. Obviously, like, you have to chip in for the gas you use and for the food you buy or for the stuff you eat, right? You got to be a good kid, too. But
that's pretty much the only expense I had was really my car
and clubbing.
Yeah, entertainment. That's right. Car and entertainment.
So what I'm trying to get to is that if you have the opportunity to cut out some of these expenses and you're younger, do it. Take advantage of that.
It gets you further.
Gets you further. Like, you're trying to put pieces and substitute players in your roster, right? You have your roster of your budget. If you don't have shelter costs, holy crap, that's 30% right there gone. Where's that 30% going to go? Please don't blow it on luxury goods unless you plan on flipping them. But like, this is not advice, okay? But that puts you ahead so much further, right? If you just do the math. And, we're always preachy about like, you give yourself advantages, it puts you ahead so much further down the road, because then you got the element of compounding in time. But anyways, I digress.
So, what were we talking about?
Well, you're finishing up your budgeting now, right? You've done 6 months, then you do it for a year, and then lo and behold, it becomes a routine for you.
That's right.
Right.
And I think a lot of times the other thing we didn't mention is, you can track it in different ways. Like we started out with a simple spreadsheet, right? Every row represented a different every row represented a different category. Every column represented a different month.
Yep.
And then we just tracked it.
Yeah, monthly. And you know what? We are going to post the link in the show notes here to our budget spreadsheet.
Our budget spreadsheet.
Which will be totally free for you guys to use. And on top of that, it's easy. Oh, sorry. It's very simple to use in terms of using a spreadsheet, because I would hope most people know how to use Excel, because most of you put proficient in Excel
on your
resume. You better damn know how to use Excel. But like, technology has made it even easier now.
Yeah. So on top of the Excel, so we started with Excel spreadsheets. And in the beginning, we used to go, and it is tedious. We used to go through our banking statement, because Jason and I don't use cash all that often. And this is one of the reasons why we don't, because for me, at least for me, if I take out $200 from the bank and then I go to different stores and spend the money, I am not very good at keeping all the receipts. And then for whatever reason, like a week later, where did that $200 go?
Unless I can expense that to some sort of real estate investment or business, then yes, I will. But
yeah, but most of back in the day, we were really good at keeping paper trail. So then we decided, okay, stop using cash because we can't figure out what we actually spent our money on. So instead, use a credit card or a debit card.
Yep.
This way, on your statement, you can see, okay, this much went to a restaurant, this much went to the grocery, this much went to gas, whatever, right? So it was easy for us to go through line by line and categorize where the money went.
And for everyone that is probably thinking, God, they're old. They went through their sheets. It's like, yes, this is before the invention of cool tools and apps. So
yeah. So next level up,
yeah,
we went to mint.com.
yeah, and that's by the people that created Intuit, right? So
yeah.
TurboTax and all these like tax software programs. So at first when we tried it, we were like, are we really gonna like access our bank stuff and all this other stuff? But anyways, once you get over all that like fear of them stealing all your data, I mean,
if you fear, then go back to
go back to
spreadsheets. Like go back to a simple spreadsheet. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and so essentially mint.com just simplifies everything because it reads all your credit card transactions and your bank transactions, and it's all read only. And this is not sponsored by mint.com, but it makes it so easy because it just filters it for you, and you can set up the same budgets and categories that you did on paper or on Excel.
Yeah, so to add a little more context, so what it does essentially, it reads your banking statements, and then let's say it reads Sobeys or something, right? So they'll know that Sobeys is a grocery store, and what it will do is put that amount and automatically put it in the grocery category. So at the end of the month, it's taken all those line items from all your banking statements that you have linked, and it will automatically put those line items in the specific categories that you've set up. And if you haven't set up that specific category, it'll just lump it into like called it, I think it's uncategorized or something at the bottom. And then you can either make a new category or put that specific expense into a category that you already have. Yeah. So at the end of the month, you can look, it already does it for you. You can look, at the end of January, let's say, you can see how much you spend on groceries, how much you spend on gas. And if let's say you use like 5 different credit cards for whatever reason, you don't have to go through all your credit card statements because it already took all that information from your 5 credit card bills and plopped it into specific budget categories.
Yeah, and you don't have to do this only at the end of the month, right? Like when Jen says statements, it's actually just the transactions.
Yeah.
So anytime a transaction happens, it's actually live. So it's pretty real time. So the idea is that you can do it. You can look at it mid-month and see where you're projecting, right? So where you're actually running towards, like, it's actually color coded, all that stuff. Man, I feel like I'm promoting these guys, but like,
I know,
right? It's green, which is great. Red is not good, and yellow is kind of like you're on that border. So for all the visual learners or people that like seeing graphs and charts and tables, like it's great in that sense.
Yeah, if you check it, whether it's a weekly basis or whatever, just to see where you're at with your budget, that helps. We did mention cash earlier, and I do know, like you said, people use jars.
Yep.
So I find because debit and credit is so easy, and if you're not constantly, I guess, reviewing where you are at, by the end of the month, you might have exceeded your budget.
Yeah.
This is where I think the jar sometimes, if you're finding yourself, like once you set the budget and you find yourself consistently not meeting that budget, I think a cash envelope or a jar method actually works maybe for specific categories. Like if there's a specific category where you're struggling to like keep that budget. If that budget is for clothing, let's say.
Or bubble tea,
whatever, right? If your clothing budget is like $200, right? Put $200 in an envelope.
Yeah.
Right? You have $200 cash. It's going to clothing. It's only spent on clothing. And when that money's out, the money's out. Right? That's not a bad, I think that we've never done that before, but I think that's a great way if you're finding yourself not being able to kind of keep to a budget that you've set.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. There are a lot of different tools that you can use, whether you want to be old school, new school, whatever fits your fancy. Just find a way that
works for you.
Because there's tools out there, right? And like Jen said, if it comes down to you really trying to create good habits, sometimes keeping it simple is actually the best way, right? And you think about it any part of aspect in your life. So, Before we wrap up, I know that when I've heard the people starting budgeting, and even when you're at work looking at budgets, right, and trying to cut expenses out in your work, like it feels restrictive. It can feel restrictive because this is an exercise that is bringing a lot of like realities to the forefront, saying, well, like, hey, hold on a second, we're going through an inflationary environment, we got to cut some crap out here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. You look at your overall health, but like, you got to cut some crap out here, or else you ain't gonna recover from this, or you're not going to put yourself ahead.
It definitely does feel restrictive. That's what I mentioned earlier. It's restrictive in the beginning, but if you make it into a habit, that restrictive is gone. It's like going on a diet. Think about going on a diet. In the beginning, when going on a diet, you're trying to be healthy, live a healthy lifestyle. Your first couple of weeks or probably months of going on that diet, you're going to feel hungry.
Yep.
You're trying to reduce the amount of intake of food. You're trying to not eat sweets, all these different things to maintain a healthy lifestyle. It is going to feel restrictive.
Yep.
But once you get into the habit of doing these specific things and adjusting your lifestyle, adjusting your habits, that will change.
Yep.
Right.
It becomes normalized,
Exactly.
right, for you. And then it just becomes part of your daily habits then, right? That discipline of going through the 3 months. It's like, oh my goodness, 3 months of budgeting, and then 6 months, and then 9 months, and then a year, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the compounding effect of discipline, right? And building those habits. So it's funny because we talk about this a lot, about a lot of different things. It's not just about your investing, but it's about all aspects. So as minuscule and as dumb this might sound about talking about budgeting, it's fundamentally necessary, right? And before we wrap up here, so I guess, listen, align your goals. What's your goal here? Ultimately comes down to your goal. A budget is a game plan that helps you draw a line in the sand to understand what players you need to put in and who you need to substitute. Okay. And then it's a winning formula. It puts together essentially the baseline for you to pick your plays on how to win the game. Then it's going to feel scary, but you know what? Hopefully it relieves a lot of tension for you and a lot of unknowns about like what you end up spending, what you end up, where the money disappears to. And then budgeting guidelines, just pick something, right? If you're younger, be more aggressive in terms of when I say savings, it's not putting money in the bank. It's keeping more, keeping more, right? And you figure out what to do with that after, right? More episodes later. And then just be realistic with your goals, right?
Be realistic with your budget.
With your budgets. Then
if you're not, you're just going to cause you more anxiety.
That's right. And before we wrap up here, I want to make this point very clear for everyone. It sounds like when you go through these exercises, it's like you're living your life out of a budget and a spreadsheet. But your everyday rich is not about living out of the spreadsheet, right? The spreadsheet just gives you a guideline. That's it. But it's not the all and end all, right? Your rich life is not defined in the spreadsheet. So don't feel like you have to spend all this time in the spreadsheet. The whole point of doing this so that you win the game and allows you to go do other stuff, right? So we're not in the spreadsheet all the time. Like we look at this once every quarter.
The spreadsheet's like I'm putting it back to dieting again. It's like tracking your macros.
Yeah.
Right? Beginning, you're always tracking everything you eat. You're literally putting everything you eat in your phone, trying to figure out how to build that healthy lifestyle. And here we're doing the same thing. We're building a healthy financial lifestyle.
Yeah, man.
And it starts by tracking.
Yep.
And once you get into the groove of it, you develop these healthy financial habits, you won't be living out of the spreadsheet. Because you will know at every point in the month where it is at. Not to exact dollar, but you will know where you're at.
Yeah. And I always compare it back to businesses. The CEOs and the executives don't look into the spreadsheets on line 4055. They look at the bottom line, right? Top line, bottom line. And they already know in general where they land, where they are, where they're trending. And that's the idea, is that you get this into a habit, a rhythm. You'll know where you're trending. Just like okay, am I going to be struggling month to month again for this paycheck?
Yeah.
You'll know.
And there's months even for us, we know we are
we spent more than we should have.
over budget because we know, hey, we're going on vacation this month. Or we know that, oh, you know what? We got to sign up for all our summer camps this month, which was this month. So our credit card bill is going to be a bit higher. But so, so you will know. But that's the thing, because we've been tracking for so long that we know if we have this additional expense, because shit will always come up. There's always stuff that's going to come up, right? It's how do you plan for it and how to prepare for it. So if you know where you're at, and when these things, not necessarily emergency, but there are months that there's going to have.
When life shit happens,
you're going to have higher expenses for whatever reason. You are prepared for it.
Yep. You're able to absorb it as well, because you know that you have excess, right? There is an excess.
And you already know you can get back to that healthy financial lifestyle or habit after that, maybe that poor month or poor quarter, whatever you want to call it, right?
The blip in you.
Exactly. You know you're capable of going back.
So this one was a bit heavy, but these conversations need to happen, and as part of your Everyday Rich journey is bringing you into our living room conversations and really sharing with you kind of these actual topics. And you can take those, build your own financial journey to whatever that is, but sometimes you gotta have those tough talks. So if you've listened to this and you found that this was a topic that was helpful, even if it wasn't, if it wasn't, hey, perfect. That means you're actually doing it. Or you don't give a shit,
or maybe we didn't explain it properly. Just let us know.
We explained it perfectly.
Let us know. We would love your feedback.
No, but there's one thing I ask. Leave us a review. Give us a rating. 4+. 4+. But that's the fee we ask for, right? Just leave us a rating. Leave us a review. Tell us what you learned. Tell us what you didn't wish you learned and talked about something else. That's the whole idea, right? The whole idea is we want to spread these living room conversations out to you so that you are having these conversations amongst yourself so that you grow and get to your everyday rich. So anyways.
Nice ending. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Now it's time to see if the kids destroyed the house. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
See ya.
Peace. Your Everyday Rich podcast is presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes. Any such information or other material should not be construed as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional.